Well, hello. Welcome back to Candid Conversations, where we are understanding and learning that, yes, love does know boundaries. This is Pam Bird bringing to you a bird's eye view. And I want to talk to you today about imperfect people. I was doing my Bible studying earlier, and I read an entry in my Joyce Meyer's Bible where Joyce is discussing and sharing with us that people aren't perfect. And as I read that, I started to think about some of the things that we do, or some of the things that I do that I'm sure other people do as well. But I wanted to ask you a question. Have you ever become frustrated because someone didn't respond or do something the way that you think it should be done, or the way that you would do it? When I think about that, I think about my own beliefs and my own internal boundaries. And so I want you to consider, if this is something that you have a tendency to do, will you consider what your internal boundaries are? Now, let me tell you a little bit about boundaries, because whatever our internal boundaries are will dictate how we respond or try to control someone else's behavior or the way that they handle things. And I want to share with you that there are two different types of boundaries. There are healthy boundaries and there are unhealthy boundaries. And how we determine our external boundaries is based on the internal boundaries that we set. Now, our external boundaries are the boundaries that we set with other people or in other situations. And those, of course, are dictated by what our beliefs are based on our own internal boundaries. So, let's look at our internal boundaries. Our internal boundaries give us an opportunity to determine our self-awareness. How aware are we of the decisions that we make and the boundaries that we set? And so I want you to think about that in terms of when it comes to really getting frustrated when someone doesn't think or believe the way that we do, or respond the way that we do, or do things the way that we think they should be done, simply because it's what we believe. And so when we increase our self-awareness, which is a part of our emotional intelligence, our EQ, we're helping to make sure that we're not setting unhealthy external boundaries, and that our internal boundaries are healthy as well, so that we can set those healthy external boundaries. So let me give you an example of how to consider that, because it's important that whenever we feel like we have to control someone, that we step back and question ourselves as to why. Because remember that God has given us all free will. That means we have the power to choose, to determine, to act, and to make decisions based on our own beliefs and our own behaviors, not anyone else's. And when we take the time, or we think that we can help someone or determine how someone responds to something, and when we get frustrated that they don't do it the way that we think it should be done, we are basically trying to control them. That's right. And that's manipulative. And we have to make sure that we're not manipulating people by forcing them to think things or do things the way that we think that they should be done, because of the free will that God has given them. So I'm going to give you a really transparent example of that. Right now, I'm experiencing some frustration with my stepson. He's in high school, and I am not pleased with the grades that he is getting. Now, my husband says that's fine as long as he's doing his best. But here's my thought. It's up to us to make sure that we're helping him to ensure that he's taking the steps to do his best. In my opinion, he's not doing his best. And when I share my frustrations with my husband, he tells me, stay in your lane, because that's his responsibility. That's his responsibility and not mine. And I get that. But what I try to do is to dictate how my husband handles the situation, simply because of my frustration. So that caused me to have to step back and to consider, what are my own beliefs and my internal boundaries that I've set, so that I don't continue to exhibit external boundaries that are unhealthy. And when I say that, because what I'm really doing when I do that is I'm enabling my husband from taking control and doing what he needs to do to raise his son. So here's what I had to do is I stepped back and I did journaling, because journaling is so important for me to increase my own self-awareness, and also through my Bible reading, because I want to make sure I consider God's word to make sure that I'm not doing anything that's against his word, and I'm living my life according to how he wants me to live it, and that I'm not trying to control anyone else. And so when I did that, I had to step back and consider what is my role, and also what my role isn't. The first thing I had to realize is that I'm not a man, nor am I a father. Secondly, I had to realize that I have already raised my own son, and I did that as a single parent. And honestly, I didn't do so well with that. So who am I to dictate how a man should raise his own son? And next, I had to realize that I have to honor my husband and make sure that he has the opportunity to raise his son the way that he sees fit. Now, as I realized these things, I also have to take into account what that does for me. Now, am I taking a risk by allowing this to happen? Of course I am. Do I have a choice in this? Sure I do. But at what cost? At what cost do I pay? Because one of the things that I consider, the risks that I take in not saying anything, is that my son grows up to be mediocre, that he lives a life of mediocrity, and that's not something that I want for him. But I also have to make sure that I understand that when my husband takes on this responsibility, that my son can end up being very successful. Yep, even without me. And so I have to really step back and consider these things and make sure that I'm playing the role that I need to play as the stepmom that I am. So here's what I had to do. I had to step back and realize, what is my role? And my role is to make sure that I set a good example for him of having a peaceful home. I also have to make sure I help him to understand what a woman's role is as a husband and a part of a husband and a wife team. Because one day he's going to grow up and he's going to get married, and he needs to see a good example of what his wife should do and how she should be. And another thing I do, I make sure I take my responsibility in helping him to grow up, to do his household chores, to do his personal hygiene, and to do what he needs to do to be a contributor to our home. And lastly, I have to make sure that I am not putting my husband in a position that he's not able to do what he needs to do as the father of his son. And so there's some work that I had to do. I also have to make sure that I do my best to stay out of his homework habits, and that I leave that up to his father, that I stay in my lane. And next, that I do my best not to criticize him when I get frustrated because he's not doing things the way that I should do them. And lastly, I make sure that I give it to God, that I leave it in God's hands to come up with the outcome when they work together to do what they need to do, to make sure that my stepson grows up to be successful in his life. And so I want you to consider any situation that you may have had in the past, or one that you're currently dealing with, where you may have tried to exert some control that's not yours to control. Because remember, God has given us free will. And when we take on the role of trying to control the outcome of someone else's life and dictate the decisions they make based on our beliefs and our own internal boundaries, we set ourselves up to take the blame when the outcome doesn't come out the way that they think, that person thinks it should. Not the way that we think it should, but the way that they do. And so think about what your beliefs are and what your internal boundaries are. Step back just long enough to increase your personal awareness, your self-awareness, so that you can make sure that you are in turn setting healthy boundaries because of the healthy internal boundaries that you set for yourself. Now, I know this may take some work. It's taken me some time to come to this, but I know I want to be the best that God has for me. Do the best that I can possibly do. And I can't do that unless I'm willing to take a look at my own internal boundaries and my own beliefs and make sure that I'm not trying to dictate something unhealthy, an external boundary that's unhealthy for anyone else. So take some time to consider that. And as you do, make sure you realize that we're all a work in progress. I'm not perfect. My stepson's not perfect. My husband's not perfect. And neither are you. So as we allow God to work in us and through us, we have to be open to considering just step back just long enough to think about, am I giving external boundaries that are healthy based on my own internal boundaries? Okay? If you have any questions about any of this, feel free to down there put a comment or a question, and I'll be happy to respond or to answer any questions that you have. Also, make sure that you're listening to the other Candid Conversations through the series that I have placed here to help you to make sure that you are setting healthy boundaries in your life. Because guess what? Love does no boundaries. And we have to make sure that the boundaries that we set are healthy, not only for us, but for other people as well. Okay? This is Pam Bird bringing to you a bird's eye view. Also, feel free to check out my website at PamelaBird.com for more insights into how to set healthy boundaries. This is Pam Bird bringing to you Candid Conversations, and I look forward to having you as a part of the other Candid Conversations that we'll be having. All right? Take care, and God bless.